Y'all ready for this?
Yes.
Y'all ready for this? Okay.
Yes.
Hello.
I was wondering No, then why is a Marcus here?
I am the Watcher. I observe all that transpires here. But I do not, cannot, will not interfere.
Okay. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of... If you guys don't remember, I'm Sam, and I'm here today with Marcus...
That wasn't my fault. I said nothing.
Yes! I'm so upset.
Glorious purpose, life.
If you guys don't remember, I'm Sam, and today I'm here with Karlos and Ferman. Say hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
If it isn't already obvious, today we're going to be talking about... Obviously, we are going to be talking about the show and the stuff that happened in the show, so a lot of plot points, a lot of character details, the events of the show, cinematography and everything like that, so this is major spoilers. If you haven't seen it yet and you're worried about spoilers, go watch the show and then come back to this episode. Yeah. So do not say that we did not warn you. Despite the fact that I currently look like Loki, I'm not going to deceive you.
Damn.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so starting off, the show was announced on November of 2018, which was
Yes.
around the time of it, like in Infinity
After
War.
Infinity
but,
War.
Yeah,
After,
after
yeah.
Infinity War, but before Endgame. So it was in between that time. So it was before anybody really knew what was going to happen with Loki in Endgame, because, as we all know, he kind of died in Infinity War.
Kinda. Yeah.
Kinda.
So, and every time people were asked about it, they would just be like, yeah, he's dead. But then they announced he was having his own show, and people are like, okay, but how's that going to work if you keep saying he's dead?
Very
And then
confusing
Endgame
times.
came out,
Yeah.
and we found out how exactly they were giving him his own show. So the first trailer was released during Disney Investor Day, basically the big day where they release a lot of like Disney content, but there was a lot of Marvel stuff that was released, obviously, because there's a lot of people waiting for the upcoming like Marvel shows and just new content, and it was released, that was December of 2020.
I remember like seeing that first trailer. I just thought it was so interesting, but I thought it'd be like its own, in its own pocket of the MCU. So I thought it'd be like pretty inconsequential in terms of like the next phase of where the MCU was gonna go. Whereas I thought WandaVision would be the one show to introduce everything about like the multiverse and everything else, but clearly
Yeah, it turns out it was
clearly
the opposite.
I was
Yeah.
very wrong. Like I thought Loki would be like this Doctor Who type show. It's like one episode's its own adventure, like, and it's just Loki like going through time, f***ing shit up, essentially. Like
Yeah.
1 week he's DB Cooper, and then 1 week they're in Pompeii. But I was very wrong. They kind of got into like the main overarching mystery of the whole TVA and the Timekeepers like very quickly. And it was pretty contained to that mystery throughout the whole show.
I also thought it was going to be sort of like a Doctor Who-ish thing where it's like one-off
Yeah.
episodes and there was no really overarching story, especially because the way the show comes about is him stealing the Tesseract. I thought it was going to be
Yeah.
him like jumping through different moments in time and space. That was us discussing our first impressions, but now we're going to move on to what we actually liked about the show. And one of my personal favorite things about the
Yes.
show was the soundtrack. It fit the
So good.
mood and the
Yes.
aesthetic and just the vibe of the show so well, and the sounds and the music choices for each of the episodes fit the aesthetics and even the visuals of those episodes really, really well, and I really, really love
Yeah.
that so much.
I just love that we finally got like an epic supervillain theme for so badass, honestly.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
One of my favorites. Yeah. Going off what Sam said, I I did watch like this YouTube video about how most of the Marvel movies are very like muted and like desaturated or something. And like I really like this whole like 70s McDonald's cigarette aesthetic. Like ashtray, sorry, like 70s with all the ashtray aesthetic with the brown. But then also like when they would go to like, what was that planet where he like stopped the building from falling?
Lamentus. It was on Lamentus.
Yeah, when he went on Lamentus and it was like
Lamentus.
it just changed to like a Guardians of the Galaxy type of aesthetic of like colorful space.
Yeah.
And I think it represents like the comics pretty well of like all these crazy colors that you don't really see in like Civil War, where it's like very like gray Germany, then gray Yugoslavia. I don't know where it was. Gray Benzemo.
Yeah, just that like colorful aesthetic of like Lamentus. Like it really reminded me a lot of like the design in Thor Ragnarok, and like and like connecting that to like Jack Kirby's like original comic art that inspired Thor Ragnarok, and like now this show. I mean, the comic influence is there. It's great that this like show just jumps between different worlds and therefore aesthetics, and it's great. It all meshes well together.
Especially in that one shot sequence where Sylvie and Loki were running through the city
so
trying
good.
to reach the train.
That was really cool.
The colors in that scene, beyond the fact that it's also a one shot sequence that was filmed like that,
Dude,
the colors are amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I love it
good.
so much, especially because I just love colors. Like Thor Ragnarok is one of my favorite movies because of the visuals and the colors. But like specifically, the episode on Lamentus was my favorite purely because of aesthetic.
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
Color theory was on point ×2.
Color theory was
Let's go. Recycle
We get
jokes.
it. You
Let's
do
go.
art.
Yeah, you do art.
We get
Scad
it.
B. Buzz. But then like
no, but
it's also-
you paint, Ferman. Damn.
that's true. I do paint. Yes.
Damn.
Paint movement.
Damn.
But it's just also the aesthetic of this TV show definitely sets it apart from the two other TV shows we got. For this, like I feel like color was definitely like a part of like telling how like the characters felt, and also showing the overall like vibe of the TVA, which was like very authoritarian. So like everything was muted, uniformed, and all that stuff. Yeah.
Shout out to the soundtrack composer Natalie Holt, because she did an amazing job with the soundtrack
Shout
and fitting
out.
it to the
So
vibe
good.
and the aesthetic of the show.
Yes. Also, shout out to that one Haley Kiyoko song in episode 3. Dude, that I still play that song on repeat sometimes.
Oh
It's
my
so
God.
catchy.
Also, moving on to another element that's not really related to the plot, but it's more of just like an sort of something that's very much different, that makes Loki different from the rest of the MCU, is that it was directed by Kate Herron, a woman, and it very much has multiple elements of the female gaze. Loki, as a character, prior to even this show, in the first Thor movie, he was definitely always written as the way more sensitive character, especially with his emotions in comparison to Thor. He's a more emotionally driven character, which is very much associated more with feminine characters, which is why Loki throughout the years has been associated more as a female gaze character in comparison to Thor, because Thor is like the sort of like macho,
Man's man type of thing.
Yeah, man's man kind of character. When he does fight physically, he fights with a sort of grace, and he does it like it's very like his fight scenes look very intimate because he's fighting with like knives instead of like a sword or like a very long distance weapon. He uses knives, he uses magic. Those are very close combat things, which makes fight scenes look way more intimate. Even in this show, especially because one of the characters he was fighting alongside and even fighting, and some of the characters he fought against were women, it made the quality of the fight scenes seem more like a performance and like choreographed and like more graceful in comparison to like other fight scenes that we usually see in the MCU, where it's very much like a fight. It's not like a performance sort of thing, which also solidifies the more like fantastical sort of elements of Loki, which I really, really love.
Yeah. Just to add on that, like I definitely noticed like Thor's moves is just like swing left with Mjolnir, electric bolt here, but then like so it's like very like forceful, but then like I feel like Loki's fight scenes, there's a lot of like dodging. Like when he was fighting each other, like all the other Lokis, he was just like dodge, whatever, pull here or something. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like I'm gonna bash your face in. You know what I mean? It was more like how do I get out of here? So I definitely agree that he uses his mind and other means more than just like brute strength.
Yeah, in comparison to Thor and even the other Warriors 3 in the Thor movies, you can tell that if you were to compare the fight styles of all the other characters that are warriors in like the Thor franchise, you despite the fact that Sif is very much more of a combat fighter in comparison to like a magic user, I would say her and Loki have more similar fighting styles because obviously she's a woman, that's ingrained in the way she's going to move. In comparison to the other Warriors 3 who are very much like brute strength, brute fighting style, like men. They fight like what you expect a warrior to fight like.
Men.
Yeah.
Men.
So
I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean like that's my observation. And obviously because
sorry. Yeah. Go on.
Obviously, because I'm speaking on the female gaze, I feel like it's sort of important for me to make the distinction and comparison from my perspective of how I perceive like Thor and the other characters that are very much meant to be portrayed as like masculine men versus Loki, who's a very much more emotionally driven character, and the way they sort of not even fight, like the way they behave and the way that they present themselves as a character.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is so interesting. I didn't really pick up on that, so I'm glad you pointed that out. That's great.
The female gaze. It's called that for a reason.
What about the
And I just think it's so great that we have women just working behind the scenes now, like much more than before. You remember the Sophia DiMartino's post about like her costume?
Oh yeah.
And how
yes. Oh, I love that so much. That like I saw that tweet. It made me so happy. The Sophia DiMartino posted a picture from behind the scenes of her costume, and she was explaining how the costume designer made it easy for her to breastfeed her baby on set while she was filming, and her costume was actually like super easy to like really easy to get in and out of, so she can breastfeed her baby while she wasn't filming, and that is amazing, first of all.
That's
and second of all, just
yeah.
on the topic of costumes, there was like the female characters in this show did not look different
I was
from
just gonna say,
the male characters in terms of their costume, especially like the TVA hunters. The TVA hunters all dressed exactly the same. The women's costumes weren't like made to look more like sexual and fitting for their bodies. They were wearing armor. It looks like armor. Everybody at the TVA looked this. Once they put a helmet on, everybody at the TVA looked the same. You couldn't tell what gender they were based off of the shape of their costume, because the world was engineered to look. Everybody was sort of dressed similarly. And even with Sylvie, though she is a feminine character, her clothing is very feminine. It's not in a sexualized way. It looks practical for the scenario that she was in, and sort of the environment that they for the environment of her story and everything like that. Her costume was very much fit for her story and her character. And all that stuff.
Yes, like everybody's like costume and everything, it just looks so functional and nothing's like objectified or anything, and that's great. Like and like it clearly it's not just on the screen, it's also off screen, just with Sophia DiMartino's tweet about her costume. So I just think that's amazing that this show is taking a step towards the right direction to like more women working in front of cameras and behind the cameras, and I'm just glad we're getting more voices out there.
Moving on to more like plot related and story related elements, the TVA, the whole sort of connecting plot point of
the TVA
of the show. We finally found out who the TVA are. We finally even just got the TVA in the MCU, and they're basically the ones who control the proper flow of time in the sacred timeline. They're somewhat of like a mysterious sort of thing. I'm assuming like in the MCU there's sort of a thing. It's like people have heard about them, but nobody can prove that they're real until they experience it.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
I just find the TVA like so interesting because like there's this whole bureaucratic organization that watches over time, and the philosophy of it is really interesting to me. Just having I think Mobius and Loki had this whole conversation about and Loki and with He Who Remains later on about like predeterminism versus free will.
Yeah.
Of course, like Mobius and the TVA and He Who Remains, that whole group representing predeterminism because they control all of time, all the timelines, and whereas Loki is arguing for free will, for chaos. I just think it's so interesting. And like, I think the MCU set up this really interesting thought experiment, at least, of like having this one flesh and blood man at the end of time controlling all of our choices, all of their choices, I mean, and the direction of everybody's lives, essentially robbing them of their agency with their own life. But like with the alternative being free will for everybody, including people that want to conquer everything and cause like another multiversal war, like what He Who Remains said, and having all that chaos not just affect one timeline with billions of lives, even more, but like affecting an infinite amount of lives. I feel like it's this whole ethical debate that's really interesting, and I really do hope they kind of go more into that with the MCU moving forward.
One of the common comparisons I saw about the TVA is people were comparing the TVA to blind religion, and how most of the people that work at the TVA were essentially following the belief that the timekeepers were the authority figure, and they were following the rules of the TVA and the beliefs of the TVA unquestioningly. And I've seen a lot of people somewhat compare that to following religion, blind religion, and so being like, you were sort of raised in that environment, you don't know anything better, so you just blindly follow it despite like not questioning it, not choosing to follow your own beliefs because you don't know anything else. And if someone questions those beliefs or tries to tell you the opposite of what you've been taught to believe or what you've believed for such a long time, they get hostile, which is sort of shown when Loki and Sylvie tell Mobius and Hunter B-15 that they are both variants and that the TVA is lying to them. Sort of, that's like a major commentary about the TVA, and I sort of understand the perspective, and I sort of love how the TVA was sort of like this figure that was meant to represent like they fully believed that everything they were doing was like perfectly right, and that was what, like, they were the superior power that controlled the timeline. And turns out they were being lied to. So
yeah, I think that goes along with a lot of like not just like religion, but okay, Karlos, you're gonna get canceled. No, like just not to name names, but just like movements in general. Right. I think one thing that comes to mind was like a debate about a certain flag, right? And it's just like, can you really blame them though if they're raised in an environment that like that's all they know? You know what I mean? And so like that's how I became like super sympathetic with the TVA, because it's just like they don't know any better. Like they were extricated from their homes and like brainwashed technically into this cult that controlled people's like free will. And speaking of free will, going back to Carlos's point, they were fighting between like predetermined stuff or like free will. It just sort of reminded me of how when I was growing up, there was always like, you have to get an office job, you know what I mean, or you have to get a stable job and to do this stuff, and really at the time it seemed more viable because of, I mean, the internet wasn't like what it was today, right? Like we could all agree that like 10 years ago, like 15 years ago, it was it still wasn't like this. And I just find it interesting now that like people like us could just like make a podcast, you know what I mean? And like have the free reign to do whatever we want and to put ourselves out there, and maybe it'll hit or maybe it won't. but then 10 years ago you had to just go through an institution, you know, and to like work a job and all that stuff. And yeah, no, I just thought that was a good metaphor also of like freelance perhaps.
Damn.
And then 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Shout out Dolly Parton.
Wow.
Our
Not
Lord
Dolly
and
Parton. Dollyville. Dollywood, sorry.
Dollywood.
Dollyville.
How
Dollywood,
dare you?
yeah.
How dare you disrespect
Whoa.
Dolly Parton like this?
How dare you?
9 to 5.
Yeah. Going back to the characters in the TVA and like how they reacted to finding about the truth of them like being robbed of their lives and just being kind of forced into this like institution. I just think it's so interesting how they all had reacted differently with their crisis of faith. Like Sam said, they're like Sam said, take 3. Like Sam said, Hunter B-15 and Mobius, they reacted one way, and then Renslayer reacted another way. I just find that so interesting about the kind of the dogmatic presence of the TVA and just like this whole Big Brother vibe they had. Also, damn, please don't cancel me.
Yeah. Well, no, also because I think it's telling how people react, right? Like, the hunters are not really up on the food chain, you know? So, like, if they see like a
it's
glimpse of
very,
something,
like-
they have less to lose, right?
It's another thing. There's like a whole structure to it, kind of like classes. Just like maybe not class,
Yeah.
but like there's definitely like a class maybe.
No,
'Cause,
class,
like there's
yeah.
definitely like a hierarchy. Yeah, there's a hierarchy in the TVA.
Yeah, Hunter B-15 was definitely more defiant just because, like, she's just a hunter, you know? But, like, Mobius probably and the Renslayer were, like, friends, right? They said, right, in the series,
Yeah, they're
they were,
friends,
like,
yeah.
we were super, like, we were friends for, like,
Yeah.
years, and it's just, like, so, like, maybe he had more on
Yeah.
the line to lose, you know?
Yeah.
Easier to... Plato's
Yeah.
cave.
And he's also in a different position. He's also in a different position in
heard of
comparison
her.
to a hunter. He is
Yeah.
He's not
like
just
a-
he's not a hunter, he's an analyst, which is basically the person who studies variants, and I guess they're not the ones on the front lines when it comes to dealing with
The
variants.
detective, yeah.
yeah.
So I
Yeah.
guess he had a lot more to lose because he was somewhat more of an authority in his position.
Or he just knew more, basically.
Yeah.
Right? He had more
Oh,
to do.
yeah, he knew more information, especially because he was
Yeah.
so close to Renslayer, who I'm assuming was the highest authority at that time. Before we get too in-depth to talking about the characters, we should move on to actually discussing
About the
the
character.
main man himself,
Loki. A liar. Oh.
Tom Hiddleston, the love of my life.
Oh my
Oh my god. Okay.
What,
god!
a
Kill a
liar.
liar.
There was an attempt.
This is going.
But
Okay.
yes,
Okay.
Loki.
Okay,
Oh,
yes.
Man of
But
the
yes.
Hour.
Take it away.
Or Eon.
The love of my life, Loki. Also, the love of my life, Tom
Oh
Hiddleston.
my god.
The two loves of my life that
Nah.
are the same person in different contexts.
Ooh. So like
Yes.
Sylvie and Loki.
Yes.
Yummy. The kiss.
Okay. Loki has been my favorite character since I've watched the first Thor movie because he is my baby. He's my sweet baby boy. I
Same.
love him.
Yes. There.
Like I said before, with the whole thing of the female gaze, he was a very much emotionally driven character, but especially in the first Thor movie, he was like he was sort of very much the contrast to the character of Thor, and that's emotionally driven. And that's very much seen through his behavior in the show. And now that he has his own show, he's a fully fleshed out character. No offense to him or Tom Hiddleston's performance or the character of Loki throughout the MCU. It's just the way that he's been written and the way that he's been presented throughout the MCU and all the other films. He was never really a fully fleshed out main character. He's always been a side character, a secondary character, or an antagonist.
Yeah. He was always in support of like Thor.
He was always
and,
he's
Like
always
the
been a supporting
Avengers, yeah.
character. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he finally got his own show, and
Good.
in the first episode
Yes.
gave him more screen time in one episode than he got in the entire 10 years he's been a character in the MCU in
Nice.
total.
God.
The first episode was almost an hour long, and prior to that, in total, his screen time was about 45 minutes, if we're being generous.
Did most of
It
that
was
come
a
from
lot.
Ragnarok,
No
though?
way.
Or-
Most of it was Ragnarok,
Whoa.
yeah. Most of it was Ragnarok,
most
and
of it
I
was
think,
Ragnarok.
it was mostly
First
Ragnarok because he was
storyline.
pretty
Yeah.
pretty prevalent in.
Yeah, he was pretty. Yeah, he was pretty. Yes.
He is pretty. Tom Hiddleston is pretty. Loki
Yeah.
is pretty.
Very
I love
pretty.
them both very, very
Yes.
much. They're both very important to me.
Yes.
I'm gonna keep
Yes.
saying this. As long as we keep discussing the character of Loki, I'm just gonna keep talking about how much I love Tom Hiddleston, okay?
OG Loki
So you might
simp.
as well...
God.
You might... Yes, I am
Oh
the
my
OG
God.
Loki simp. At least of the server.
That's true. Of the same.
Yes. If you were on Tumblr in the early 2010s, when the MCU was sort of developing, this is what Tumblr has been waiting for 10 years.
Yeah.
This is what I've noticed, because I myself was a fan of Super Hulock. But sort of the way the story of the Loki show was written, it very much has elements of what people associated with the Super Hulock fandom, which is, if you don't know, Supernatural, Doctor Who, Sherlock. They sort of had like a mega fandom on Tumblr, which sort of
Wow.
coexisted with the
Yeah.
MCU fandom, and specifically Loki and the Loki fans and the Hiddlestoners. There's sort of been this sort of this sort of universe that's existed of this like mega fandom of like Loki fans, Tom Hiddleston fans, and Super Hulockians, because that's what they were called. Don't judge me.
God. Super Hulu.
Oh my god, this is
2013. This is 2013 Tumblr. This is what 2013 Tumblr was. There's so many elements to
Yes.
this where it's like them fighting Goliath is basically them like hunting a monster, which is supernatural. The mystery elements of it, with the whole thing of like Loki and Sylvie trying to figure out what the TVA actually is, trying to figure out how to take down the TVA. That is very Sherlock, like deduction and like sort of investigating the world that they're in and the situation that they're in. Obviously, it's not like a very obvious reference to like detective and all that stuff, but it's has elements of like
the energy's there.
deductive
The vibes
reasoning
there,
and deduction
you
and
know?
all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And oh my god, I feel
my God.
I sound insane talking about this. And then
Yes, you
Doctor
do.
Who, the whole thing of traveling through time and space. So it's like Loki and Mobius going to Pompeii, traveling through different apocalypses, going to different moments in time or different
Yeah.
places in space. Doctor Who, like Karlos said in the beginning, his first
Seriously,
impression was it was
yeah.
going to be very one-off like Doctor Who. It's
Yeah.
Super Hulock. The DB Cooper scene was... I found that scene so
was great.
hilarious.
Yeah.
Because, like...
I thought it'd be a bigger scene though.
I
Just
know,
how much they
like
hyped
in
it
the
up
trailer, I
same
feel
with
like they
President
hyped it up
Loki.
a lot because it was in the trailer. Like every version
Yeah.
of the trailer, they had some form of the DB Cooper scene in it. I thought it was
Yeah.
going to be a bigger deal. The show made
That
a
was-
really
that
good
was
play
fun.
on like the sort of the mystery of DB Cooper and sort of making it like Loki was DB Cooper, and the only reason why they never found his body is because he never actually fell to the ground because he got taken up and back to Asgard on the Bifrost, which I found
with the-
hilarious.
Yeah, that's
That
pretty
was-
funny.
I thought it was gonna be a bigger scene, but I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it. It was
It was pretty
pretty
fun.
funny.
Yeah,
It's pretty funny.
Same.
Also, Tom looks so good. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Start the simp counter. Start the simp counter.
Yeah. Kind of jumping back on like what Sam said, like Loki's been a character in the MCU since Phase 1, and of course, if you've seen Endgame, you know like this show kind of jumps off of that moment where Loki steals the Tesseract and off somewhere. And a criticism I heard online was that this Loki variant that we're following is that same villain that we followed in Avengers. He was like more nefarious. He was more of a villain. But I think they like fleshed that out really well in the first episode. Like when he was looking forward to his life on the tape recording thing. And then he saw like his mom and dad die and his reconciliation with Thor and then his death at the hands of Thanos. I think from that moment, the point they were trying to make is that the past portrayal or like the perception of Loki as this villainous trickster was just kind of like an illusion. Like, of course, that's how we're introduced to him in the first Thor movie. And he was given that role by everybody in his family and all of Asgard. So he essentially lived up to it. And like he said to Sif in the Time Stone episode 4, he craved attention because he was scared of being alone. And that's why he did all these schemes, all these tricks. And like even if you look back in the first Thor, his whole motivation was just to please Odin. And I think the Loki we get in this show, who grows to become more selfless, that was his true character all along. It's just been suppressed by centuries of playing into this role of the god of mischief and just living under Thor and Odin's shadows. At least since his mother, I think like Mobius and Sylvie are the first people who really see him as a person, capable of change and of being good, without needing Loki to like play into this role of the god of mischief. So I really enjoyed just watching his development into this more selfless hero, this protagonist that we can root for. Just watching this whole thing unfold it truly felt earned. And what I loved about at least the end of the show, this season, like Loki goes through all this development and he still ends up alone, at least for now. I really like the tragedy of it. It's very Shakespearean. I don't know. It just reminds me of like the myth of Sisyphus. Shout out to mythology episode. But like essentially he's been trying to get attention. He's been trying not to be alone for all this time. Through his tricks, and through his illusions, but that hasn't worked. So he's truly tried being vulnerable and open in the show, and he's trying something different, but it doesn't ultimately work for him. He still ends up exactly where he was. It's a really interesting, dramatic tragedy that I really like, and I really hope he gets a happy ending in the end, of course. Yeah. I hope we get that at some point in like the second season or Doctor Strange or whenever he pops up. I just really loved what they did with his character arc in the show.
Yeah, same here. Like I definitely appreciate this character more. I would say that at the start of Thor Ragnarok is where I started being like, maybe Sam's onto something. This character is a decent character, and he's not just like a throwaway. What's a throwaway? Like the warriors of the Thor, like Sif and stuff.
Warriors 3.
Warriors 3. They like threw them away, and that's how I kind of viewed Loki until like Thor Ragnarok, where they were talking about how, like they were just like, why are you like this, basically, right? And then Thor was like talking. They were having that discussion. Then he threw him at the guards. And then he died in Endgame. He died in Infinity War, and I was just like, oh, Cy Young. But then they had the show, and I would like to think that this show, they do spell it out for you, but for those who missed it, like I feel like this show is a lot about like reinvention, right? And telling the audiences that you aren't just the label that people give you. And to anybody who's watching it, there's always a shot at not even just redemption. But changing who you are in general. Like it's possible. And like there are people out there who will accept you for it, like your new you or your authentic self. As Loki is never really mischievous. He was more like he was kind of shoved that role because Thor was this and Odin was that, and he has and Loki's just And I like to think this is like one of the more wholesome messages that in Thor movies, MCU media in general, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. I think his best moments of character development were the first episode when he sees the real of how his life was supposed to play out, because in that moment he sort of gained the motivation to choose his own destiny because he didn't believe he was supposed to die with the perception and identity that the world had given him. He wanted to change himself because after that was, first of all, Tom's acting in the scene was amazing. The moment where he broke down and was saying how it's, I don't want to hurt people. I only do it because that's what people, he's basically saying I only do it because that's what people perceive me as. That's the label people have always put on me. That was like the moment where Loki realized he wanted to choose his own destiny, and he wanted to just sort of like say a huge like you to the TVA of like, you don't get to control my life. Yeah. I control my own destiny. Yeah. He wanted the free will to control his life. Especially after he found out like him taking the Tesseract was not part of his free will. And like it was never his choice. He was always destined to die, and he wanted to prove that he's not destined to die. He gets to choose his own destiny. And the other major element of moment of character development, I think, was also when Mobius put him in a time loop, a bad memory time loop in episode 4, because that is truly when Loki had to sit in like the depths of his misery and his emotion, and like sort of suffer the consequences of the perception that people have forced upon him. All he wanted to do was satisfy Odin, gain the favor of his brother, like be liked by the Warriors 3, be liked by Sif, be liked by the people of Asgard. He was an outsider. He wanted attention just because he wanted people to like him. He didn't like being put in the label of like the deceiver, the evil one, the sort. He only hurt people because that's what he was expected to do. He didn't enjoy it. Like I said before, Loki's a very emotionally driven character, and there's so much character development in terms of him coming to a realization of like his emotions throughout the show, but especially in episode 4 when he gets stuck in the time loop, and episode 1 when he sees the real of what his life is supposed to be. Those are like the biggest moments for him.
I would agree.
Or like in my opinion.
No, yeah, I think so.
I just want to add I think another big scene is just at the end when he's confronting Sylvie about not killing He Who Remains. And just that the moment before the kiss. Like everything was great
the kiss.
Before the kiss.
I love the kiss.
No.
Kiss was perfect.
I just loved how vulnerable he was, and like I think that moment where he was saying he didn't want a throne, he just wanted Sylvie to be okay. That got me in the feels, and it was just this great culmination of his arc to being someone truly selfless. He's not doing all of this just for his own personal gain. And I think that moment is just very telling of how much he truly changed.
Yeah. I mean, not only just his selfishness, but his like reluctance. Like, I mean, like, okay, let's just say he wasn't fully set on sparing He Who Remains, right? He just wanted to think about it. Like that in itself is like already like character development, right? Because like if he was the guy before, he would just be like, nah, screw this guy, kill him. Not even for a throne, maybe just like because that's the part he was given since he was a child. And, you know, breaking that mold and really just thinking about it for a while and saying like, maybe violence ain't it, you know? That I like that one. Yeah, I liked it also. That's the ending scene. And the kiss. I love the kiss. Kiss is great.
Stop. No.
Stop. Another thing that was introduced about Loki in the show was his identity as a queer person and his identity as a queer character. Through I guess his TVA file, there was images in the TV show's intro, I think also in the outro, and just statements on social media from the official like showrunners and producers of the show that Loki is in fact gender fluid, as he is in Norse mythology and in the actual comics. And through the dialogue in a conversation between him and Sylvie on the train in Lamentis, it is revealed that Loki is bisexual, which is true to both the comics and mythology as well. There are some issues with this in terms of just representation standpoint, but it is one step towards getting more queer representation, especially in the MCU, who has a very shoddy history with queer representation. But the fact that canonically, now in the MCU, we have gender fluid bisexual Loki, it's not all said and done, but it is a step towards what more representation and queer representation in the MCU. So he is now canonically queer, which is great. And also, any opinions stated by us here about like Loki as a gender fluid character are not ours. In terms of representation, we can't really speak on it because none of us are of that gender identity.
Fluid.
So, yes, we will discuss more about the representation of Loki as a queer character later. But I just wanted to say that now it's canon, and that's amazing. On the topic of gender Loki, we have the variant that a lot of people perceived or expected to be Lady Loki, Sylvie. She doesn't refer to herself as Loki, and she was, I guess her birth name was Sylvie. She wasn't born as Loki, but she is described as a Loki variant. The only difference is she was born female and she is female, and she identifies as a female. So I wasn't really surprised at the fact that we got her as a character. I was just surprised that this was sort of their way of giving Lady Loki in the MCU, considering that Lady Loki is actually just like the canon universe's Loki, but like in a female form. So it was kind of a little bit weird to me when I first saw her. In the comics, Lady Loki is literally just Loki as a female, like as a woman. Like his physical, like his actual physical like gender is, because like he shapeshifts into a woman. And that's how like Lady Loki is in the comics. In the show, Sylvie is basically, in terms of like character traits and personality and everything like that, and physical appearance, is sort of a combination more of Lady Loki and Sylvie Lushton, who takes on the name of Enchantress in the comics. They're sort of like combined those two characters to create Sylvie, which I thought was really, really interesting. It's kind of killing two birds with one stone, which also makes her a very interesting character in comparison to both characters in the comics. Yeah. And her dynamic with Loki is kind of unique, considering they're meant to be the same person. They're meant to be variants of the same character.
It wasn't a huge jump in like believability to me to think like, yeah, she's a variant of Loki, but I think they made Sylvie different enough from Loki. Main Loki, to still have this really interesting character dynamic together, and like you could tell they're very different people with different upbringings and personality. I feel like Sylvie's more weathered and more untrusting and just a bit more headstrong than Loki. Yes. And I kind of reminds me of Thor, actually, in that way.
I'm going off, just like focusing on Sylvie though. I don't know if this is a controversial opinion, but I do appreciate when female characters specifically are not just announced that they're strong, but they just show that they are. And like, I did like the Wasp. Yeah. I like the Wasp because like from Ant-Man, because she was just a badass. But I felt like in Endgame there was like this like poster pose of like, don't worry, she's got help. And I was just like, right. But Sylvie is just very like, is just a cool person, you know what I mean? And she doesn't, and it's not, and if they're not shoving it in your face that like, oh no, she's cool because she's a girl. Like, no, she's just a cool person. And like the fact that she's a female just adds on to that representation, and I do like it. I think she's a very cool character. Like, she's my favorite actually. Shout out Mobius.
Honestly, she's she's a badass.
Yeah.
Badass.
I think another thing related somewhat more to like the whole point I made earlier about the female gaze, which kind of connects to what Ferman said, because that is very much like an element and effect of the female gaze, is like she's not she doesn't have to announce that she's strong. She just shows it and she proves it, and she can hold her own. But also, one of my favorite things ever is just this random detail of her going to the TVA and tying her hair before she gets into a fight, because they never do that in movies. For the Wasp, her hair is always in the first movie, her hair was short, and in the second movie, her hair is always tied in a ponytail, so she doesn't need to tie it up in the first place. Yeah. For most other female characters, especially with Natasha as Black Widow, they always make it what would be realistically inconvenient in a fight scene. That small detail of Sylvie tying her hair before getting into a fight and absolutely kicking ass at the TVA was amazing to me. Meanwhile, we have Loki, the little dramatic that he is, flipping his hair every 5 seconds, but we appreciate
iconic hair flip.
It's just efficient.
We love it.
Fighting with shorter hair, definitely.
The character of Loki in general, is very, very intelligent, but Sylvie specifically, because she escaped the TVA as a child, and she explained that she learned magic on her own. Because in comparison to Loki, Loki grew up on Asgard. He was taught magic by Frigga, his mother. But Sylvie, because she was a child when she was taken by the TVA, she probably didn't learn this magic from somebody. She had to teach herself how to do it. First of all, she learned how to use a temp pad almost automatically after she stole it from Renslayer when she was first captured. And she figured that she cannot be traced jumping through timelines. And she taught herself magic, and magic powerful enough to get through whatever sort of like mind blocking or memory erasing that they use on TVA agents, because she used it on Hunter B-15 and the other Hunter that I can't remember the number of, but it's like C. Is it C-20? Yeah. She used her magic on Hunter C-20, and it was powerful enough to get through whatever magic or enchantment or whatever were on the Hunters to erase their memories. So beyond the fact that she's she's a badass, she's extremely intelligent, she's extremely skilled in something that she was never practically taught, and even just in the actual like hand-to-hand combat fights, just like Loki, her fight scenes look very, very graceful.
Just to touch on all the Lokis also, like Sylvie, Loki, and then like classic Loki, Croaky, Loki Gator. I feel like all of them have their own fighting styles when it comes to not just like knives or swords, but also like with their magic. Like classic Loki's more like it's like the strongest Loki I've ever seen in terms of like conjuring up stuff. And like Loki, Loki has like telekinetic powers, and then Sylvie has like
her
enchanting abilities. And also just like she has like that curvy sword thingy. Loki Gator bites people. Like so, like I like the variation of fighting styles that the Loki have.
Biting. Is a fighting style.
Yes.
Another great character in the show that we all love is Owen Wilson.
Yes, the character's name is Owen Wilson.
Wow. Yeah, he's literally Mobius is just a variant of Owen Wilson, honestly.
Wow.
First off, wait, I just have to wait, no, hold on. I just have to address, I can't believe they didn't get Owen Wilson to say wow in the
That's
show.
true.
I can't get over that.
Priority?
Like, honestly.
It is my priority.
We need that. Yes. It's very important.
That and or jet skis. Like they should have had one or the other.
Yes. Like when I was watching the show, like I had to settle for him saying how or how. Like so stupid. It's so stupid. But yes, Mobius, he's such a great character.
Yeah.
I really hope he gets his jet ski.
No, my favorite thing about Mobius, obviously not to like discount from his character, but because it is a show about Loki, the relationship Jesus Christ the relationship between him I cannot speak. Okay, the relationship between him and Loki is something I found so interesting, especially because like in the beginning, it wasn't really like condescending, but it was like sort of the way that Mobius would talk to Loki. He's like, oh, you think you're so smart and all that stuff. He's like, I've been studying every moment of your life. I know exactly how your life ends. I know exactly everything you've ever done and all that stuff, because Loki's basically the guy that has like the most variants, as Mobius said. Mobius says there's like they've pruned more Lokis than any other variant. So I'm assuming Mobius was also like the like sort of the head analyst in charge of like all the Loki variants and studying them and everything like that and all the patterns and all of them. But it's sort of just like the banter between Loki and Mobius is so funny good. Because it's just
their chemistry
it's just two condescending smartasses trying to condescend and outsmart ass the other one.
One up each other. It's
amazing. It is amazing.
Honestly, just any scene where it's just the two of them talking, they're like my favorite scenes in the whole show. You do get the sense like Mobius is very integral to the development of Loki. Like I said earlier, and like it works like the other way. Like Loki is really integral to getting Mobius to like think outside the TVA and turn his eyes to the truth. And I think they're very important characters to each other. And I just love that dynamic between them.
Definitely. I didn't realize this until Karlos pointed it out, but I think both of them are really integral to just the character development, as both of them kind of take the other one out of their own like bubble, I guess, right? Like with Loki, he was in the first episode, like what Sam said earlier, it was a very important part because Mobius just ripped him out of his reality and said, you know what, like you're nothing. And like that kind of starts Loki on this journey of like, okay, so if all of this is like futile, right? Like glorious purpose. If glorious purpose is futile, then like, what can I do else? You know, and that kind of sets him on this journey. And for Mobius, it's like, oh, the TVA is trash. And then he's like, oh, well, maybe they are trash. And then that gets him to turn on Renslayer and to discover the truth. And so I agree with Karlos, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, Sam.
I know. I one of the things I loved is that, like, sort of, despite the fact that it was really, really obvious that Loki actually genuinely trusted Mobius, especially in the scene at the end of episode 2, where Loki was deciding whether or not he actually wanted to go through the portal and follow Sylvie to find out, like, who she is and everything. Because there was very clearly, like, he was hesitant to leave that area because he didn't want to leave Mobius behind, obviously, because it would be like, he also felt like he would be betraying Mobius because he trusted Mobius, and I'm assuming he thought Mobius trusted him, and I think Mobius did trust him. Loki has always been portrayed as a character that cannot be trusted. And for once, Loki felt like somebody trusted him, and he was just going to betray the one other person in his life who actually genuinely believed in him, just to follow, like, just to find answers for his own, like, selfish reasons. He wanted to find out, like, he wanted to stop. He wanted to find out the truth about the TVA. He wanted to find out who Sylvie was, because at this time he didn't really know who she was. He just knew that it was like a variant of himself who had managed to outsmart him, practically beat him in a fight, outsmart the TVA, and basically outsmart everybody. That was a major thing, very obvious, that like Mobius and Loki had sort of a level of trust in the first 2 episodes. They were developing like a bond, and that was very obviously broken by the fact that Loki follows Sylvie through the portal.
I think also like Loki still trusted Mobius even after he betrayed him, because like remember when Mobius was questioning him about like was that one on Lamentus where like they were about to like kiss or something, or like they were holding hands and that caused like a Nexus event, and then like Mobius was like, nah, she's dead or something, and like Loki was just like, what?
That was cold, dude. Mobius is, oh my god, that was cold.
No, but I think also like one of the biggest things was when Loki was trying to explain to Mobius that he is a variant. Everybody at the TVA is a variant. The moment where Loki was revealing the truth to Mobius, where he's like, they're lying to you. You're a variant. Everyone here is a variant. That was the thing I said about like the TVA as some kind of like sort of like a metaphor for religion. It was sort of like questioning Mobius's belief. That's why he was so determined to deny what Loki was saying, because he's like, it can't be real. They can't be. Like, he's just doing that to trick me, because it's like, also, he'd been studying Loki for all this time, and every version of Loki had always been like, as is like the perception of him, deceiver, a liar, all that, like mischief. He is the god of mischief. And Mobius was like, you're lying to me, that can't be true, because he just refused to believe it until he found the evidence for himself. I feel like in that moment, that was when Mobius sort of realigned his trust in Loki, because he realized that Loki wasn't just lying to save his ass, he was actually telling the truth, and the person who was lying to him the entire time was actually Renslayer.
That was a good moment. I think Jeremy Johns said it best, because like in his review of episode 4, which is my favorite episode, by the way, because like that conversation and like that revelation of that all of them at the TVA being variants, and then just the doubt that kind of seeps in throughout the whole episode. Like Jeremy Johns said, like that really shows the power of a thought. Loki's very much like a boy who cried wolf in this situation. Like he's lied so many times, even in that isolated conversation with Mobius, but then that last like revelation just kind of sits in the back of Mobius's head until like he starts pulling that thread, and then he eventually finds out the truth. And same thing with Hunter B-15, who also a great character. It's such a great reveal. I just really like the intrigue of that mystery. Yeah, since I just mentioned her, Hunter B-15, also a great character. Very badass.
Very no nonsense.
I just loved her development from being like this badass authoritative figure that you can tell like in the early episodes kind of has like this disdain to variants just by the way she treats
especially I think
Loki.
Especially with Loki variants, she was just like tired of them. Which,
Yeah.
to be fair, I completely understand after seeing all the other Loki variants.
Honestly, Then once she learns the truth, and once she sees the possibility that everything she's believed her whole life could be false, I just love her development to really changing her perspective and her whole like glorious purpose. But
Life.
shout out to the characters that change their minds once presented with new information.
That was one of my favorite things
Beautiful.
with Hunter B-15. Even with her character introduction, when we first meet her, she's very much like, not indifferent, but she seems just very distrustful of Loki, despite how much Mobius is like, you can trust him and all that stuff. But like suddenly all of like those emotions, like her anger, her distress, and all of that's like all of those negative emotions are suddenly turned over its head when Sylvie reveals that they're all variants and that the TVA is being lied to them, is lying to them. And she turns all of those emotions away from the variants and like Sylvie and Loki specifically, and turns it towards Renslayer, because after the reveal, she was so willing and down to help Sylvie and Loki kick ass, and I love that.
Yeah.
So, because she's the
Honestly,
one who got Sylvie her sword back from Renslayer's office, and that made me really happy.
Yeah.
I love that scene so much. I love that scene so much. The part where they're in the timekeeper's chamber and she like throws the sword at Sylvie.
I just wish the Hunter B-15 was in that fight longer though.
Yeah.
It's like she throws the sword.
It looks like she could take on
knocked out
Renslayer.
like
I don't
two
know how she
dudes.
got
I'm just
hit.
like, okay, I thought.
It's for the
Honestly.
Yeah, it was literally like 10 seconds after she tossed the sword.
Yeah.
I thought she'd be in the fight longer.
But
I
it's
thought that'd
okay.
be cool,
It's
but
all good.
oh well.
She's still a badass. I love her.
Still a badass.
No, but I also
Still a
love
badass.
that they took like all of her emotions and literally flipped it on its head in terms of where she directs it. Because obviously in the beginning it was like, variants, Loki's, Sylvie. And then suddenly it's like, oh, they're right. Okay, now I'm going to kill my boss.
Yeah. Just a very like
that was so
logical
that I
person.
found
Oh my
that
God.
I found that hilarious, but it's also like completely valid. Like that was a perfectly valid reaction and a really good sort of way to keep her the same character but completely change her motivations and her purpose as a character.
I also think like on top of it being valid, I think it's also a very like human response. Like you just wake up one day and it's just like the people that you trusted and who are guiding your life is terrible and awful, and they took away a happy life from you, like what she said in like the Rock Smart, right?
Yeah.
Like when they went back and they was like, I look happy, and it's just like, oh, that sucks. You know what I mean? Because she seems like a very like upset character, mainly at variance at first, and now so great character development there. But
I love Hunter B-15.
Hunter B-15
so
is a
great.
good character.
Yeah. One character I think is really important to talk about is Renslayer, especially because when she's first introduced, there's she's the judge that's putting Loki on trial for violating the sacred timeline. But then also a little bit later, it showed that there's somewhat of a friendship and a relationship between her and Mobius. And you can see a strain in their relationship start to grow when Mobius finds out the truth about the TVA and the fact that the TVA has been lying to everybody and that they're actually all variants. Right off the bat, you can tell that Renslayer is a very like suspicious and very shady character. Like she has a lot of secrets. or she has a lot to hide, or she's hiding a lot of
Shady
things
as
because she has a
hell.
lot to lose, obviously, because she is
Yeah.
the judge.
Personally, like out of the villains we've had in the Disney Plus series so far, Renslayer is my favorite. I just feel like she has this one mindset about the purpose of the TVA. I think she truly believes in it. That's why she, like, even after it's revealed the timekeepers are just robots, she still sticks to the dogma of the TVA, that she still thinks there's a purpose to all of it, or at least she's wait she at least thinks that there was a reason why someone started this whole thing. That's very interesting to see her try to pursue that. I also really think her relationship with Mobius is very believable. Just through their conversations, you get the idea that like they've known each other for a long time. I really bought into the idea that they're friends. Like when they were having that conversation at the end, Renslayer calls out Mobius for like, you betrayed me. We've been friends for how long? And then you have a crisis of faith. Yeah. And you just forget about everything. I really, of course I'm on Mobius' side because like he's my man, but like I did feel a little bit sympathetic to Renslayer at that moment.
Just going off of what Karlos said too, like you could really tell that Renslayer as a character was more about like duty first, I think, and I think that's why she got promoted to judge, right? And Mobius was more of like a free spirit, so to speak, because he's often testing out new ways to do things, and she's very like by the book. She's like, nah, are you sure about this? And reluctantly trusts Mobius at times, you know, with his experiments like Loki. And like, I agree, like I felt terrible for Renslayer when she's like, oh my god, I can't believe like, you know, Mobius, like my man who follows me into battle, just, you know, like even though the truth is we're all variants, like we have a higher purpose in life, in this life. And I feel like she doesn't really care that she's a variant. I feel like she, you know, believes that whatever she's given now is the way. Shout out Mandalorian. This person made a choice, like a real choice, that she saw the truth, and she continues to like with this I guess this path that harms others' free will, right? Which is the pursuit of the real TVA like head or something like that. And I definitely can't wait to see what happens in Loki season 2 for her character.
Yes.
Yeah. And
speaking of the head of the... Oh, wait, sorry, no. Were you going to say something?
Oh, no. I was gonna... You can go.
The transition.
Speaking of the head of the TVA...
Kang.
We gotta talk about... Kang. Oh my god. He who remains. Oh. Otherwise, Kang. Yeah.
Conqueror.
Well, either or. You can throw names at
Immortus?
it. I don't know.
They never technically
Call him
directly
Kang,
named
right?
him as Kang.
That's true. Yeah. So
In the
he
show.
he
But if you do,
remains.
like, look it up and, like, look at the wiki, look at, like, people's theories, look
it is
at the way
Kang.
they talk about it, they...
It's another Agatha
Official
thing.
statements have named him as Kang, but they never stated his name in dialogue in the show.
Yes.
So,
But it's the same actor, right, for Kang. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Kang is a variant
He's...
of He Who Remains.
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect, actually. Yeah, that's a good definition.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about him, though?
Honestly, like, when I first watched it, the finale, I didn't like... I didn't like it, Jonathan Majors as Kang at first, because he was just, like, so out there.
Yeah.
I wasn't really expecting it, but then, like, looking back, I was just thinking, like, I think I really let my expectations for the finale kind of ruin my enjoyment of it. Because I was really certain that it was going to be like King Loki or something at the end of the line. But I was wrong. I kind of let that ruin my experience. So like I had to watch it again and to really like appreciate it. And like I love it now. It's really, really good and nuanced. And like it's very believable for someone who's been all alone at the end of time, in control of everything. Like he's been quarantining for how long? It's crazy.
In a Panera Bread.
In a Panera Bread.
Panera Bread.
Yeah. Jonathan Majors was really great in this show, and I'm very much looking forward to his next appearance as Kang the Conqueror.
Yes.
Ant-Man in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, and wherever else he pops up, because like I think they did a really good job setting him up as the next big bad of the MCU moving forward.
Yeah.
Like at least compare that to Thanos' first appearance. It's dude, Marvel has come a really long way, so I'm really excited.
Yeah, I agree with with you being thrown off. Like I was also thrown off because I was expecting a very Thanos like teaser or entrance of like him maniacally grinning at Loki and Sylvie or something. But to find like a Willy Wonka-esque character just, at the end of time alone with like a orange clock just kind of threw me for a loop there. But thinking about how long he's lived for and how many, people he's effectively killed, right? It could probably do a lot to somebody, and like probably having to repeat the same monologue over again, trying to find the right champion, so to speak, like, Shazam. It could take a toll on somebody. It could take a toll on somebody. So
that's a good,
I really, the second or third time around I watched it, I really appreciated his performance. And I actually prefer, this sort of older, wiser being as opposed to this tyrannical leader effectively trying to kill Loki and Sylvie,
Yeah, I sort of had the sort of expectation of like a true villain sort of villain where he's like in a chair surrounded by darkness and he turns around, he's like stroking a hairless cat. That's what I was expecting. That's what I was expecting. But I actually really, really liked the version of Kang, that we got when I first saw it. There was nothing about it that I disliked when I first watched it. Like I actually really enjoyed seeing it the first time. I was like, this character who's exhausted, but he was still trying to make his case of like why you should take over for me, despite the fact that this job is exhausting. Like he was trying to convince Loki and Sylvie to take over, but he was also trying to explain that he himself is exhausted and that the job that he's offering to them, the power he's offering to them, is something that will drain them of energy, life, motivation, everything. But he still wants them to take it. Yeah. Because he doesn't want to do it anymore.
And you really feel like the weight of the multiverse, I guess, on his shoulders. Because like he says, like he knows that what he's doing is wrong. Like controlling and puppeteering everything. But with the alternative being like worse versions of him, an infinite amount.
It's a lesser of two evils.
Like perhaps. Wrecking Yeah, exactly. Oh, and like, just I guess going off on a tangent here, but like, I really like this finale is more subdued and character driven. Like all the tension is not with some action. It's just between all the characters. Like between Loki and Sylvie and the gambit He Who Remains gave them. Like looking in retrospect now, I'm glad we have that sort of finale. Like instead of like a big CGI fight, like because we already got that in the 5th episode. I'm just realizing now that was kind of like I guess like our problem with WandaVision finale just kind of felt generic, whereas this finale feels like a bit more earned, more dramatic, and it still has a lot of stakes and it sets up a lot of things for the future. So I really like the finale.
I also, for me, my favorite part about the finale was the major conflict didn't become the conflict between Kang and Loki and Sylvie. It became between Sylvie and Loki and both of their contrasting opinions of what they're supposed to do with He Who Remains and his proposal. Like, should we kill him? Should we not kill him? Should we hear him out? Should we take over? And they were very much at, like, for this entire time, there was a mutual understanding between the both of them up until that moment. That was such a great like way to sort of wrap up the story too, with the two, Loki and Sylvie, being at odds with each other after all this time that they spent like building a bond with each other, despite the fact that like He Who Remains and Kang are like are being set off as the major villain. There was still no major conflict involved. Like he was not the major conflict. The major conflict was still about Loki, because it is still his show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just
Yes.
I love that entire scene was just a setup for more conflict between what was essentially Loki and himself.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I agree with what both of you guys said. Just to touch on more about like, the reason why I like this show out of all the other shows, like the Falcon Winter Soldier and WandaVision, is because it's very like, it's like heavy on the dialogue and like heavy on like the drama, like a play. You know,
Yeah.
like, there's a
Yeah.
lot of deception, there's a lot of betrayal, and like I love that in a Marvel setting because, like I mentioned this to Karlos off camera, that I love Sam Raimi's Spider-Man because there's a lot of
They love me.
you and I love Sam Willem
You and I, that's
Dafoe
a
different Spider-Man. Well, like I love Sam Raimi's Spider-Man is because, well, Sam Raimi like allows the actors to act. Like it's not just punch here and punch there and that's the drama or that's the action. Like no, it's like the real drama and the action is in the words, right? And in the faces that they make. I love the fact that, you know, there wasn't any like hard punch, there wasn't any blood. It was like he gets teleported away, right? And now he has to sit there alone thinking that he just lost everything once again. And I just love that sort of like internal conflict, right? That's displayed externally because he's fighting a female version of himself. It's like
Yeah.
almost like Loki fighting like an older version of him, which is an untrustworthy, cannot trust anybody, like hatred type of thing. And yeah, I really like this finale. I think it was a fitting finale.
Yeah.
And I think that's what WandaVision
Yes.
should have done instead of a CGI. I don't know.
CGI snowball fight.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
But
Yeah.
yeah. We really like the finale.
Yes.
It was really good.
It's really fitting.
No, this is a major issue with a lot of fans. It's mostly with the finale. The kiss between Loki and Sylvie. That is a major issue that a lot of people take with the show because it's basically the sort of perception is a lot of people were saying that Loki and Sylvie are just variants of the same person. So they're different versions of the same person. So they are the same person. Sort of the show was trying to put together a romantic relationship between the two of them. Made a lot of people uncomfortable, and personally it made me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I just don't believe
Yeah.
the whole entire thing of like the only person Loki could ever fall in love with is himself, because throughout the years of his character and like with the way that he's always been portrayed in the MCU, it's very, very obvious that because of the perception of other people, Loki also hates himself because of the front that he has to put up. In the show, he does have the dialogue where he calls himself a narcissist, but I believe it's like the complete opposite. I truly believe that when he was saying that he's a narcissist, he was just saying it to like appease Mobius at the time. He was just trying to like he was just trying to agree with what people, he was trying to do the thing where he's agreeing with the people around him because that's what they perceive him as. I always personally saw Loki as a character who's very much like conflicted with himself. He does not like himself because of the perception that is put upon him. So the fact that him falling in love with Sylvie is very much implied and directly like created into the show bothers me because everyone's like, oh, it's very like much he would fall in love with himself. He hates himself. And just because of the fact that they made him a female version and people think that it justifies him falling in love with himself is something that doesn't sit right with me. And also just the fact that the writer, the director, and even the composer of the soundtrack have all come out with different interpretations of the relationship between Sylvie. One sort of pitch, the original pitch for the show was was like a love interest, not as like to have a female character as a love interest, not as a variant of Loki. But then it continued despite the fact that she was a variant of Loki. The director said it was more of a sibling relationship. The composer said she composed the soundtrack with the perception that there was a more like Loki was using Sylvie as sort of a replacement for his mother. It's the interpretation of their relationship is all over the place, but just the fact that there was any implied and direct romantic relationship between Loki and Sylvie is just, it doesn't work for me. And I really hope that that kiss at the end was not some more romantic, but it was more motivated by like betrayal and betrayal, like was more just Sylvie knowing that Loki trusted her wholeheartedly and only using it to betray his trust, not because she genuinely felt romantic feelings for him. And I really hope that when Loki's saying he just hoped that she was okay, it wasn't in a romantic way. It was more in a way of, for once he actually saw something in himself that was worth caring about. Because I do not like them together romantically, no matter how hard they're trying to push it.
Me too. Just like, even if you strip away like the logistics of it, like it's weird, like they're variants of themselves. Well, like, is this masturbation with extra steps?
It is though.
Like, even if you strip away, hold on. Even if you strip that away, you just think of them as characters. I have the same complaints with this with like Rey and Ben Solo and Skywalker. It's just they had this really complicated, nuanced relationship, but then it all culminates to this kiss. You can almost explain all that away, all that nuance away with just I don't know, love. I don't know.
Love.
I kind of saw the relationship more like as like, you know, siblings or just like really, really, really good friends, and that like genuinely like care for each other. And I think I would have preferred if they kept it that way.
Okay.
I do not like them.
All right. Well, here's
as,
for me, like, it's not like I violently like oppose it like how Sam does. I mean, I do see her point. Like, even now when she explains it, like, she makes really good points. You know what I mean? And I feel like I know this isn't Hollywood, but I just media in general, like the film industry, likes to see a male character and a female character, and they automatically just like put them together as a couple, even though like they have the slightest bit of, you know, like motivation or perhaps like interest. I mean, they're the same character at this point, but yeah, and I do understand that trope gets tiring, and the fact that they're the same person is a bit awkward, or more awkward period. Yeah. But for me, like when they were like characterizing Sylvie, and what I like about these variants is that they could be whoever they want to be, right? So like I understand that she has the label technically in this universe as a Loki, but to me she just seemed like a different person entirely, you know? Like I think it would be weirder if it was like Tom Hiddleston kissing Tom Hiddleston, and I just be like, oh like, what the is that? You know what I mean? But the fact that it's like two different actors, right? Two different characters in theory, right? Because like she's way different than the other Lokis, and then the other Lokis in the Void with Alioth is totally different from like Loki Prime, right? So that's why I didn't have too much thing with the relationship, but a really interesting thing that Sam brought up just now that, you know, I didn't know until now was she said that, you know, Loki kind of hates himself, right? So, I mean, me just now thinking about this just now, like maybe that kiss and maybe him liking Sylvie is kind of him like reconciling with his flaws and who he is as a person, and is more of a symbolic sort of self-love thing. I mean, I know it's still kind of gross that he kissed himself, but but like it's kind of like, but this is why I love the show, is because there's a lot of like symbolism and there's a lot of like drama, right? Like Shakespearean kind of thing. So like you could interpret the kiss like a Judas kiss, you could interpret it like surface level romantic, whatever, blech. Or you could see it as, you know, this guy who's spent years in the MCU hating himself. Why am I like this? I'm Laufeyson. I'm not even Odinson, right? And now coming to terms with, you finally make me like, I love myself. And then he just gets betrayed again by himself, and maybe his worst fears are realized, like, oh, maybe I am a piece of shit, right? And then he goes to the TVA and he sees Mobius, his only friend, and he's like, I don't know you. And he's like, oh, fuck, I'm all alone again. And maybe this is my destiny, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, that's why I like the ending. You know, even the kiss. I like the kiss, okay? I know I make the joke that I ship him, but
My thing is, I like with the kiss, I don't like it if the context and intention is romantic. But if, like Ferman said, if it was for the sake of like for character development of like for the thing of like even Loki can't trust himself, or like a version of himself, and it's more like a Judas kiss where it's like Sylvie knew Loki trusted her wholeheartedly and she was using it against him, very much understand that whole entire element. So, but if it's romantic, then I take issue with that. But
yeah.
if it's a metaphor for self-love and and like the ultimate betrayal,
Self-love.
then
And that's on self-love.
other than the relationship between Sylvie and Loki, one of the things a lot of people were criticizing, this is not my opinion, this is not opinion of anyone on the podcast, as we cannot speak for the representation of gender fluid people. This is just an opinion I see a lot of on Twitter, but Loki's representation as a gender fluid person and as a queer person in general is that they failed to properly represent him as gender fluid and bisexual, despite the fact that he is they have made him canonically gender fluid and bisexual. Obviously, it is a step forward with queer representation, as I said before. But there is a major criticism with a lot of fans saying that they failed to properly portray him. They didn't even really try. They only really confirmed it through like that image of like his file that said gender fluid, and the dialogue between him and Sylvie about being bisexual. They've never really portrayed it. But I also think in terms of his sexuality, that's sort of the most that we're probably going to get from it, because I don't think that a romantic relationship of any kind is really that essential to Loki's character development as of now. But I do think that there should be elements of his queerness that should be developed more so that it's better representation. But that is my personal opinion on it. Obviously, I can't speak for the way that they portray his gender identity and all that stuff. But I do think that they should improve their representation of him as a gender fluid person and a bisexual person in the second season, since it is confirmed that we are getting a second season. And with that, we will be talking about theories.
Yes, theories.
The only theory I have, it's not really, it's more of an educated guess, I guess. Just predicting like where Renslayer would go. That's another thing I probably didn't like about the finale. It's just I felt like they kind of wrapped up Renslayer's arc a little bit. I felt like we maybe just needed like one more scene of like maybe where she seeing Renslayer and seeing where she ended up. I would have liked that at least. It felt a little rushed for me. But going back on theories, I just feel like Renslayer is definitely looking for Kang. That's really self-explanatory. If you with the quote of her saying like she's gonna be in search of free will. Free will meaning like the one in charge, based on her conversation with Mobius. She's either gonna join forces with Kang, based on their like history in the comics as like love interest, or she might try to become the one in charge. She might betray Kang, you know?
Yeah.
So that she can have that power for herself. I think like that could be really interesting. Just like have her flip and betray Kang whenever we see them next. To have her join forces with maybe like Sylvie and Loki and Mobius, just to like maybe get more leverage on Kang. And I feel like that could be really interesting. Or I don't know. I really don't know where this show's going forward. It's a giant mystery. So I don't really have as much theories for this. I mean, there's also of course like we're definitely gonna see Kang again in the future. He's already confirmed for Ant-Man and the Wasp. Can I speak?
Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Jonathan Majors is confirmed for Ant-Man and the Wasp.
I have to agree with Karlos though. Saying when he says that he feels like the Renslayer bit was a bit rushed. I believe in Renslayer's motives when it comes to like, I'm gonna find the person in charge. I still want the TVA to exist, but I just wish there was a little bit more reinforcement with that. I mean, she's kind of like in Mobius, right? Like she's like Mobius, where her whole life is just a lie. She's a variant. But then like I didn't really like, it just seemed too like quick. Like no. Like we still need this. We still need the one in charge, without really knowing what you know, where people are going, you know. So I just wish they fleshed that out a bit more. But in terms of like theories, I really have none. I mean, probably Loki's gonna get pruned in the second season. Gonna meet up with Kid Loki maybe, you know, and then they're probably gonna fight Goliath one more time, and then we'll see. But then like, but on a serious note, I wanted to ask you guys like what happens at the end though? Because remember where they're looking at the timeline branching out would be Hunter B-15 and Mobius. Is that the real Hunter B-15 and Mobius, or is that like not Hunter B? Like I don't like how does that change even happen? Because off camera we were talking about how why would there be multiple TVA, right? If there's only one TVA to control the sacred timeline. But now that there's multiple timelines, why would there be another TVA? Did the TVA get reset? So what are you guys' thoughts and theories on that?
The thing I said when we discussed this before, the thing that I said is I think that the TVA that was created by He Who Remains is exactly the same. It's still the same TVA. I think that when Kang the Conqueror took over, though, he sort of just like repurposed and reset. Not reset, but like repurposed the already existing TVA and the members of the TVA and the people who work there for his own personal agenda. That's why like Hunter B-15 and Mobius probably don't remember who Loki is, like that version of Loki at least, because like their memories or like their memory erasure or whatever has been reset by whichever variant of He Who Remains, basically Kang, when Kang the Conqueror took over. That's what I think. It's sort of the thing of like religion again. It's they all like unquestioningly follow what like is established as their like brainwashing or whatever.
What about you, Karlos?
Yeah.
I mean, I do get Sam's point. Like, and I think like having like Kang be like this figure that controls what the people of the TVA know. It kind of does feed into this overarching like Big Brother type figure. Controlling this whole like organization. Personally, I really do think like each multiverse has its own TVA. I think Loki might have ended up in a different one, but I don't know. I've been wrong before, so I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay.
I really don't
That's
know.
fair. No,
Just watching Rockstars or something. Honestly,
you rock stars.
I don't know.
Yeah.
No, but for me, I personally don't have any like theories, at least none that I really strongly believe are set in stone about what could happen with season 2, because season 2 is confirmed. If it was the credit scene for it was the mid-credit scene for the final episode, so it's confirmed that there is going to be a second season. But I have no real theories other than like agreeing with them that Renslayer is probably out looking for Kang or some sort of figure to sort of help her find a new understanding of like the world and how it works now, because sort of her world kind of has been shattered now and like her beliefs have been shattered. But personally, I think because of this very much obviously opens up the world of what is going to be Multiverse of Madness, or the film Multiverse of Madness, upcoming movie. So for me, I think that the story of season 2 is going to be very much deeply ingrained with whatever happens in Multiverse of Madness. And because we don't really know anything about what is going to happen in Multiverse of Madness, I can't really come up with theories for that film and how it connects to season 2, let alone make up any theories for season 2. Because I think both of those stories are going to be very, very well like ingrained in each other, especially because this is what opens up the multiverse in the MCU. So there are many possibilities of what could possibly happen now, because they have opened up such a large hole that could that just leads to endless possibilities.
Anything can happen.
Anything can happen. But this is a more jokey thing. If they do bring back Kid Loki at some point in season 2 or in some way they bring back Kid Loki, I hope they bring in the character of Leia, because in the comics she's basically like his sort of like support system and friend that sort of is like brings him guidance through like his journey of self-discovery. I know that obviously the show, like, the season of the show isn't going to be about Kid Loki, but I hope that if they bring back Kid Loki, it's, like, within the, like, sort of context of the version of Kid Loki that's on a, like, journey of, like, finding himself again, like he is in the comics when he was with Leia, sort of, like, on his own journey.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the same variant of Kid
Yeah.
Loki that we see in the original show.
In the Void.
It could be another, like, multiverse version of Kid
Yeah.
Loki.
Yeah.
But I just want to see the character of Leia in the show in some way, shape, or form, because she is great in the comics, and I like, because they're bringing in more characters and more comic book accurate elements into the MCU. I really hope to see her because she's a somewhat important character in sort of Loki's life, even though it is Kid Loki's life and not canon Loki's life. I just really want the character of Leia. I love her. She is great.
I think we can see the version of Kid Loki that we meet in the Void again, because Sylvie is like still at the, what's it called, the Citadel or whatever,
like the weird
at the end of time.
castle thing
she's
that
still, I feel like there is an opportunity to like meet all the other Loki variants again, maybe even President Loki and Kid Loki and Loki Gator, especially since he's a fan favorite now. So I think we can see them again, and of course, like the possibility, just like the fact that we have Kid Loki in the show. And I mean, in the MCU canon now, I think that's adding more fuel to the fire of the possibility of the Young Avengers further down the line in the MCU.
Definitely.
I mean, we already got the twins from WandaVision and
Miss Marvel,
like,
right?
Patriot and Falcon. Yeah.
and we have Cassie Lang,
and
who has been in the MCU for
and
a
Kate
good
Bishop
while.
and
Kate Bishop is coming soon, so
yeah.
we
and
have
Kate Bishop,
most of the elements to create. And we also
yeah.
have America Chavez coming in.
America
to
Chavez,
the
yeah.
MCU too.
I always forget.
Very much.
Yeah, she's gonna be in
all of the
Doctor
characters
Strange.
for Young Avengers. There's very much a potential for it. It seems like they're building up for it, but there's been a lot of rumors of whether or not they are going to fully commit to a Young Avengers as a standalone thing, or they're just going to be like sort of ingrained into other stories, which
like out there, just in the universe. I see.
Yeah.
Do you think Loki is gonna be in the multiverse of madness though?
I think so, because him and
I
Sylvie
feel like he has to. Yeah.
him and Sylvie practically are the reason why it opens up in the first place. So
That's true.
Yeah,
that's why I
jumpstart
said
the whole
I
thing,
think the
so.
story of Multiverse of Madness is very much going to be what is going to be the like perfectly aligned with whatever happens in season 2. They're going to be like very connected, the same way like him stealing the Tesseract in Infinity War is directly followed by the show.
Do you so any final thoughts on the series and the impact or?
So okay, me.
Yeah, I mean, this is you are the original Loki simp.
Go first. Yeah. Go
the
first.
original Loki simp.
Yeah.
I might be biased, but this was by far my favorite show of the ones that came out. I might be biased because Loki has been my favorite character ever. I love I love him. I've always he's been my favorite character forever. I also just love Tom Hiddleston. He's my favorite actor. Not even one of. He is my favorite actor ever.
It's great.
So the show is my favorite beyond like the visuals, the actual story, the music, everything. Every element of the show I love, the aesthetic, all of it. This is my favorite show by far. All of the artistic elements fit so well. The story was amazing. The acting was phenomenal. It was a really, really good show.
Top-notch.
But I might also just be extremely biased.
I am not biased, and this is still my favorite. This is still my favorite show from the MCU so far. Wow, compared to Daredevil, not yet. But like out of the Disney series, Disney Plus series, it's definitely still my favorite out of the 3. And it has me really excited for what's next in store for the MCU, because I feel like this is the first time in a long time where I'm not really certain where the MCU is gonna go. So I'm really excited for what they have planned with all the multiverse, and I'm really a fan of Loki now as a character, and everyone else at the TVA and everyone else that we met in the show. They're like, this show has the best supporting cast out of the
Definitely,
Disney
I'll
series,
agree.
Disney Plus series, by far. And just the filmmaking of it, like everything just came together to make a really special show. And I'm really looking forward to season 2. So yeah. What about you, Ferman? What did you
Yeah.
think?
Well, like my two co-hosts have said, this is like the best Disney Plus show so far. Like compared to WandaVision, and compared to The Falcon and Winter Soldier, I definitely think that Loki succeeded in like tremendously in like increasing like likability with the character, progressing his story. I feel like Ragnarok truly started it, and then now Loki is continuing that torch with the same energy. I think the main thing I took out of Loki though was that they took a character with a niche following, I would say a niche following, and they just made him like one of the most likable characters in the whole universe. Like more likable than some other like more likable than some other characters who were supposed to be that status. Captain Marvel. But like I'm just saying I'm just saying that like characters who got a movie at the start, who's supposed to be I guess one of those like the headliners, right? And they take this character who is like what I don't know, off camera. Sorry, a lot of things happen off camera. Sam mentioned that it was really the Loki fandom that brought him back. Like he was supposed to be a side character through and through, but then because of like this weird like undying support for this man, he became this main character, and I'm all for it. Like he is great, and it just shows like the power of storytelling, like true storytelling, right? Through dialogue and through not just set pieces and aesthetics, but true like relationships with people, and like how they show that through through new directors and whatever. And I think this was a good gamble on Marvel's part to do this show. So yeah. 10 out of 10. Yes.
Yeah.
Good show.
Like Ferman said, like Loki has always been a character that's sort of been like put to the side and made like a secondary character. He has died or like died. Well, okay, in all 3 Thor movies, he dies. So him finally getting his own show was sort of just destined to happen because the fans have never really accepted that he dies, because they're like, he's the god of lies, he's the god of mischief, he's a deceiver, he can't die. It's always an illusion. People always refuse to believe he died, and they refused to let him die, which is what brought us here and gave us this show. It's not just Marvel that did this, it is the fans and their love for this character.
Definitely.
I think it paid off.
It really did pay off.
This fandom, I'm gesturing at myself because I am part of this fandom. Like, not just fans of Loki, but people who love Tom Hiddleston's portrayal of Loki. Like, fans of Tom Hiddleston are the reason why the show exists. And I agree. It also shows through the work how much Tom himself loves the character, and that's one of the things that made the show super, super like good and super genuine, is because he was so involved in the process of making the show and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And that really shows through. So.
Yes. Great show.
Check it out. It's now on Disney Plus right now.
Yeah.
Whole thing.
All 6 episodes plus the making episode. So.
Yeah, that was a great episode too. Thanks for watching. I hope we didn't ramble on for too long.
Yes.
But we hope you enjoyed our discussion on Loki, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Alive.